Flying solo in business doesn't mean you're alone. That is the biggest takeaway, whether it is just having people to bounce ideas off of or people to hang out with for a happy hour because you don't get that like you do in the workspace anymore. Just plan in the community time, plan in the accountability groups.
People buy emotionally first and then use logic afterwards. That was a real warping of my brain learning about that.
A big thing solopreneurs miss is they simply don't tell people what they do.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome to another live episode of Prospecting on Purpose. I am joined today by Joe Rano and Carly Ries, the founder of Lifestar and the Fractional CMO at Lifestar. Lifestar is a community, if you're not familiar with it, it's a group of resources that is really built around the solopreneur business. And one of the big things that this team is driving for is to really create a community, create basically a whole bundle of resources for anything that you may need in your business of one. They are literally writing the book, Solopreneur Business for Dummies. So I am very excited to have these gurus on the show. Joe, Carly, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, I like starting my morning off calling me a guru. Thanks, Sara.
Anytime. And it's Friday. We're going to have a fun time. This show will last about 30 minutes. So let's just dive right in. Joe, I'm going to start with you. One of the things that I'm curious to learn from you is in your business with Lifestar, you work with all sorts of solopreneurs in different industries, whether it's B2B, B2C, like services or products. There's so many different challenges that really come up and bubble up when you're a business of one. How did you really start to pick out these top three that we're going to talk about today?
Well, I did something really crazy and asked people. I ran a survey a few years ago and surveyed 332 one-person businesses. And I'm talking coaches, contractors, consultants, kind of solo entrepreneur types. And we asked them all a series of questions, some of which were, what were your greatest challenges? First, in getting started in business, and secondly, in running the business. And I want to focus today on the running aspect, right? So we found that regardless of what they called themselves, regardless of what they did, their top three challenges were really broke down like this. It was all about revenue, meaning lead gen struggles, sales struggles, and then managing their time in the context of not having enough of it, burnout, and those kinds of things. So regardless, it was like 50% struggled with revenue growth. And that was broken down to those two components. So, one of my questions early on in starting this is, does it make any sense to not follow my own advice and not niche down into some specific area? And I said, these people, not only do they all need similar kinds of help, they can help each other because they're cross-pollinating. So it worked out really well bringing them together.
Well, it was really fun because, Joe, we ran that survey, like you said, a few years ago, but it was kind of like a hypothesis that we could test in real life over the past few years, working with all the solopreneurs that we have. And we literally just did an analysis, I think it was yesterday, Joe, where we take feedback from some of our attendees from our events, and they talk about what they're struggling with. And the exact same three things keep popping up time and time again. So we had that survey when we were starting everything, but now that survey is just coming to life and we see it every day.
Well, it's funny because even though this conversation is tailored on solopreneurs, that impacts any type of role as a profession. It's how are you getting business? How are you moving the business through a sales funnel? And then how are you managing your time? So I'm really excited to get into these three topics, and we'll probably do it in that order. Carly, maybe let's start on the marketing side. Like, what challenges do you see solopreneurs interact with when it comes to marketing their business?
The biggest ones that I see is they try to apply marketing techniques that can be applied to Fortune 500 companies or businesses with a bunch of employees. And they think, I need a social media campaign. I need an email campaign. I need to have all these automations for marketing. The reality is most solopreneurs only need a handful of clients to live the life that they want to live. And so the one-on-one interactions are just so much more important than thinking about these big picture things that bigger companies do genuinely have to run.
SEO.
Yeah, exactly. We always say SEO as a joke or as like our go-to example, but SEO is great. But SEO is also changing in the age of AI, and it's nobody really knows what it's going to be in a few years from now. And you can make your guesses, but does a solopreneur want to spend the next 6 months really working on SEO and getting a client after a marathon? Or do they want to have a cup of coffee with somebody that's a warm lead and close that the next day? And the other funny thing, and we were talking to another gal in one of our podcast episodes that I totally agree with, a big thing solopreneurs miss is they simply don't tell people what they do.
Mm.
Afraid of sounding salesy. And let's say you're a person, well, you are a personal contact of mine, but let's say you don't know what I do. And literally just send an email and say, hey, it's been a minute. I haven't talked to you in a couple months. I just want to tell you what I'm doing. This is really fun. Don't be pitchy, but just let people know what they do. The story I always go back to is I overheard my parents telling their friends about a decade ago that I was a creative director for an ad agency, neither of which were true. I have never been a creative director. And at the time, I wasn't working for an ad agency, but I realized, oh my gosh, my parents can't even articulate what I do because I haven't told them. And so thinking about those low hanging fruits, thinking about those personal contacts that could be easy referrals, even if they don't need your business, they might know somebody that does. So it's simply telling people what you do and being proud of it. That is one of the easiest ways that you can generate leads. But so many solopreneurs think they have to be the next expert marketer, when in reality, a lot of them got into a business to coach. They didn't get into a business to be a marketer. They got into business for that passion that they have. So think of the easiest low-hanging fruits you can use and go with those. You don't have to follow the playbook that the bigger businesses are running.
Okay, I think that's really something I want to talk about two of the different things that you said. The first around the concept of not having to do all the things like digital marketing, and you don't need SEO, and you don't need a newsletter, you don't need a podcast, you don't need social media. Maybe some of them, but I think I appreciate you giving us permission to just not have to do it all, because it that area of the business is quite overwhelming for me. And your other point on letting people know what you do, I have found that in my business too. People want to refer you, they want to help, but if they don't have clarity on what you do, they're not able to do that. And it's an area I'm wanting to work on more too. So give us a couple of more tactics, Carly, on like, how do you get that warm coffee? Or
Yeah.
lead coffee one-on-one. How do you get the one-on-one interactions?
So think about like if you well, that would be for in person. You could also do like virtual coffees and everything. But identify the types of people that this is the easiest way I have found to do this. Again, it takes the scary marketing world out of it for people and to just get really involved in your community. And if you surround yourself with people that could be a good fit for you, like I keep going back to coach, but this would apply. Like I'm just using that as an example. If you're a coach, go go take Pilates classes, go join a volunteer group in your area, get to know people. It's kind of like how a lot of real estate agents, I feel like, do it. They just become a part of the community and then people know them. And for people that are afraid of marketing or sales, even for that matter, it takes the strategy of how do I target these people out of it, because you just get to know these people. And then when they're like, gosh, I'm having some issues with this or that, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm a coach and we're already friends. So let's do this. So I think just taking that big marketing like bulletin and crumbling it down to things that are less scary, make it a lot easier for people. So that's one way. If you want to do it virtually, if your business isn't just a local business, we've actually had a lot of success with Sales LinkedIn Navigator as a way to just connect with people. The thing you want to be like conscious about on LinkedIn or through other social platforms is you don't want to be pitchy. You know, when you get those things where it's like, hey, I noticed you're doing this wrong. Let's grab a cup of coffee. It's like, no, you've already insulted me. I don't want to get a cup of coffee with you. But if you're like, hey, Sara, I love your podcast. I love what you're doing. You seem to be awesome at sales. I would love to just like pick your brain for a few minutes, have a virtual cup of coffee, How does that sound? And make it a relationship building tool rather than a sales pitch tool. You will see so much difference in your social media efforts if you take that approach.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment too, because I think it's a nice blend between the marketing aspect, like the getting the leads aspect, and the sales aspect. Is one of the big things that I teach in my trainings is always be adding value. Like, how can you add value into anything that you do, whether that's a social media post, whether that's a product launch you're doing, whether it's, the yoga class example, Carly, like how can you add value to your friends in yoga? But in that message, that example you just gave, I would say there's a lot of free ways to add those emotional bank account deposits before you ask for the coffee. So, hey, maybe before you reach out to someone and say, I love your podcast, promote one of their posts on LinkedIn, write a review for their podcast, like get on their radar as someone who's engaging with them, because it makes it a lot easier to do the ask. You're not pulling from an empty bank.
Yeah. And I mean, like Sara, I have no intentions of asking for you for anything right now, but our relationship, including Joe, has grown organically over the years just by like, hey, we're here for you. Hey, we're here for you. And I know that if I had to make an ask, I would feel a lot more comfortable asking you now because we have a relationship than I would after the first meeting, because you provide value. I know what you're good at. I know what you can do for others. And I'm confident in your response. You know what I mean?
Totally. And Joe, what are the things you've seen with the lead gen side from the business angle? Like, tell us a little bit of your feedback, because I want to get into the sales conversation more, because
Sure.
what Carly's saying is perfect. It's a lot easier to ask when there's a relationship there.
Well, 100%. I mean, a warm lead is always better than a cold lead. And it's pretty easy. I mean, I have people that I just absolutely love that I have never spoken to because of interacting on LinkedIn. I've also got some that I don't really want to bump into, um, but there's just these awesome people. And just by, commenting on their post or them commenting on mine, you can build a relationship. Yes, it's not the same as a face-to-face meeting, handshake, coffee or beer, but it warms up somebody. And then when you do want to make an ask, it's not that uncomfortable to have a conversation. My take is that, from the perspective of generating sales, if you can warm these people up, you said always be adding value. And I think that's a really, really good advice. And, there are a lot of ways to do that, but, the whole concept of the lead magnet, right? That's this thing that's actually adding value and doing something, either solving a problem or addressing a pain point or, enlightening them, is a powerful way to build trust. And I mean, the issue here is that nobody's going to buy from you until you've gone through a process of, building trust, creating some resonance, so they know that not only are you trustworthy, but you're somebody that they feel, understands them. Right? And you got to build that resonance, and then, from there you can kind of take it to the next level of eventually inspiring action, right? Of getting them to say, hey, I'm going to do something. But these lead magnets are a great way to do that. We use free events, free virtual events, invite people, add tons of value. We have two that we do. One where we have some expert or experts come in and either do some kind of a webinar type of thing or a workshop. We love the workshops. And then we have one where we just get people together and they go into breakout rooms and help each other address their biggest current challenge. But either way, we're adding value. We're not asking for anything in return. And that builds trust. And then from there, when you say, hey, then we say, hey, join our free tier. We have a free tier in our program. And well, why not? That was good. This will be better. So, but the main thing I think to think about in terms of building these kind of warm leads with these lead magnets is don't just give. I've soured on the idea of here, download my PDF, because you download them and you never look at them. So it needs to have some level of investment, so some level of their time. And that's what I love about events is somebody's putting in an hour to come in and do something. Well, they've invested. Now, that this is not somebody that just decided to click download, right?
Right. Well, and it's funny, Joe, because that's how we met. You sent me a LinkedIn message saying, hey, you look like you're building a business. We have this free event. And so I joined the event. Since then, I presented on your event. I had a producer for the Price of Business radio show reach out to me. Now I'm a contributing commentator on that radio show. I've had many different guests on my podcast that I met through the Lifestar community. So you just never know where that like trickle effect is. And to Carly's earlier point, you guys could ask me for anything. And it's an easy yes. And I think that's really where like the community aspect comes in. And then it doesn't feel like you're being salesy because it's much more organic and fluid.
And just to expand on that, I mean, this whole idea of building out this community either through social media or through some, like, we have a community aspect to our offering, but there's lots of them out there for different industries and different kinds of people. I mean, I watched a couple of events ago. We have like a networking session afterwards, and this one guy's challenge was he was a world expert on this specific topic on computers, security thing. I don't know. I didn't really understand it. But he's like, I can't get any traction. Nobody's listening to me. And I just don't know how to get people to realize. And this other guy says, well, I've had an established business. He's a solopreneur in the similar field. And I get what you're saying. And I know how valuable it is. And let me help you introduce you to the people that I know, because, we can probably do something together and really do great. And I just love seeing those kinds of things happen. And that's what happens when you put yourself out there. And
yeah. And to that point, Joe, when people offer to help you, they're usually, nobody offers to help if they don't mean it, because people do value their time, which we're going to talk about. But the other thing is, if somebody offers to help you and you don't say yes and jump on it, you miss a big opportunity, you miss a big window. I've had people that I've met and I'll offer for them to be on my podcast, and they did dilly dally. Like, I'm not going to chase you. I'm busy. Please say yes or no, and just take action and move. But it's almost like in that concept of the emotional bank account, that gentleman offering to help, you say yes, you take action, you express gratitude, you give feedback once it's done. And that's how you kind of continue to build that cycle and build out your network. And I think for the solopreneurs, there's a lot of opportunity to add value and network because the businesses help each other. The cross-pollination comment you said, Joe, is really important to talk about.
Absolutely. And just on the flip side of that, right? Here's the guy you don't want to be. So have somebody reached out to have me on their podcast, and then came back and said, well, there's a $2,500 fee to be on our podcast. And then I looked, and their popularity is literally half of what our Aspiring Solopreneur podcast is at. And I'm like, you should pay me $2,500 to be on your podcast. But I'm never going to talk to that guy again, ever, because it's like, that's not how it's done. It's, give earnestly and meaningfully, and it will come back to you.
Give earnestly and meaningfully, and it will come back to you. That was a good mic drop.
Put a dash next to that.
Yes.
My name.
Joe Rano. Let's talk about sales next. Let's talk a little bit about salesmanship, because I think one of the things that I was really surprised when I started my business was I had this idea, because I've been in B2B complex sales, like that would be my client. And that really, ultimately is the core of my business, is business to business complex sales. But I did have a lot of solopreneurs come up into my orbit. And I think I know that it's because when you're a business of one, you have to go sell yourself. And that's something that most people have not done in their careers. And it's not something you can outsource because people are buying you. So what strategies have you seen from the people that you work with that have kind of overcome some of those challenges when it comes to the salesmanship side?
Well, I just want to start by saying that I have never met a solopreneur that likes sales except for sales coaches. So nobody that's not a sales coach is excited about selling. And that's one of the things that is really important, is that you have to get people comfortable with the idea. And so the first thing to my eye in talking to people about this is it starts with this feeling that if I'm going to sell, I have to be sleazy. Mm-hmm. And, that's not true. So the strategies that I've employed to try to help people with this is start by understanding what pain points you solve for your target market. And if you don't have a particular very focused target market and a set of pain points that you're going after, you probably aren't ready to start selling. Mm-hmm. But once you have that, if you can really help people with something that's making their life or their business worse than it should be, how do you need to be sleazy to sell that? If somebody needs water and they're thirsty, and you come to them and with a very reasonably priced bottle of cold water, water, there's nothing sleazy about that. So you have to view yourself as having an obligation to try to help these people solve their pain points. And then the next thing is people tend to get into the mode of just talking, right? And the best way is to listen and understand people, right? And if you listen to them and let them tell you how the pain points are affecting them, then you can reflect that back. You're not being sleazy. You're telling them what they told you back, and just maybe putting it to some perspective or talking through how you might help them solve that. So that's really, I think, one of the biggest hurdles initially is understanding sales as a process of helping people, of being consultative, and then doing good in the world by helping them have less pain. So that mind shift helps a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I like sales, so I am the exclusion, the
exception to the rule.
But I do think that sales is a very noble profession, because if you have something that's valuable, that's going to help their business move forward, that really does change the game. And one of the things that I work on with my clients is, instead of focusing on like the services and the facts and features of whatever you're selling, think about how it's going to either impact their business or impact their lives. So if you're selling B2B, it's how does my product or service make my clients money or save them money? And then if you're selling B2C, how does my offering enhance and elevate their life? And just that mindset shift too, Joe, to your point, is you're not pushing anyone to buy. You're not convincing anyone to buy your thing. You're basically just inviting them to partnership so that you can help elevate their life or their business.
Right. The one thing I will say that I learned by studying that surprised the heck out of me, guy with the physics degree, is that people buy emotionally first and then use logic afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
That was a real warping of my brain learning about that, because, my thing, and I always joke, at my last startup, we had this very complex enterprise software that we created, and we would walk everybody through every feature of that software until their eyes glazed over and they wanted to run screaming from the room. And wait, no, that's not working. And it's like, no, here, you're going to be the hero of your company when you can do this and this. And okay, now I'm listening. And then you tell them how.
Well, one of the things that I talk about in my workshop is just a little language shift. So when you present your pricing, first of all, I always practice in advance. I will practice to my computer saying my fee is X before I get on the call with the client. If it's specifically to talk about dollars, like my fee is X, what's your speaker budget? I kind of have some of that scripted in advance. But on the concept of selling emotionally, buyers buying emotionally versus logically, instead of saying, what do you think about that? Or how does that number sound? I say, how does that feel? And I'll say, how does that feel? And that kind of shifts the conversation to be less logical, because now I'm talking to their heart versus their brain. How does it feel versus how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's
interesting.
Be a sales coach.
The other day I asked someone, how does that feel? And she said, it feels expensive. And so I was not ready for that response. So on the overcoming objections, there's all these different little things that are always going to happen no matter what you're selling. And every time you run into something, you learn something. And I think that's part of the beauty of the entrepreneur journey, is you really are, it's a vehicle for your personal and professional growth too. And that's how I like to think of it when I make mistakes, because they happen.
The other thing I want to piggyback is, in terms of overcoming objection, is you're transparent with your price. You're transparent with everything. The more transparent you are at the beginning, the less objections you have to combat through the sales process because everything's out there. So I don't think you should hide anything when it comes to going through your sale, because they're going to figure it out at some point anyway.
Just to piggyback off of that, because that's a great point. And, one of the things that I learned in my last startup was that we were the high price leader in the industry. There was one other company that was similarly priced. They were $1 billion company. We were far from that, but we were the highest price with them being kind of tied. And we would lead with that. We would lead with, we are the highest priced option you will find. And here's why. And there were good reasons. We had very good reasons, but we led with that. So then you didn't get through an hour-long presentation or 2 weeks of negotiations and go, oh, we can't afford that. It's like, put it out there.
Yeah.
If it's a common objection, just start with it. And a lot of times you get past it. We had people that we told, no, you really can't afford us. So they would come begging. No, we can.
Well, and it's all, all of the stuff that we're talking about is just comes with experience. But I think the other big takeaway from what I want to leave our audience with today is that there's so many resources out there in the form of people, podcasts, courses, consultants. I think that's, if these are areas, the lead gen, the marketing, the sales, if they're areas that you struggle with, there's resources aplentiful to help you with it. So it might be just carving out the time to commit to it. So let's talk a little bit about time management as our third challenge to overcome. Joe, maybe why don't you start us off with, like, where are you seeing people getting stuck?
Oh, look, it's being a solopreneur is by definition going to be a struggle for time, right? Unless one of these lucky people that can do the 4-hour work week thing and make 10 grand a month, which, I used to want to be a rock star when I was young. That didn't work out either. So it's, one of those things where you have to understand that, especially initially, you're probably going to be working a lot. Mm-hmm. And if you have a goal of, like I do, and a lot of people do, I don't want to work more than 40, 50 hours a week. That might not happen initially. So, but what happens is that people do a couple of things wrong. Number one, they refuse to outsource. If they can't afford to, fine. But a lot of times they refuse to outsource things that they could easily outsource. For me, like bookkeeping and accounting, right? I could do it. I got an MBA. I took a couple of accounting classes. I could figure out QuickBooks, but it would cost me a lot of time. I wouldn't do it that well. And all that time wouldn't be used to grow the business. So that's, a no-brainer for me and a lot of people. Just find somebody to help you with your books so you can do other things.
And Joe, can I piggyback off of that
please?
Real quick? You said, and maybe you can't afford it, you can trade with other solopreneurs. So Sara, let's say you hate doing taxes and accounting, trade with a CPA and coach them on sales. And then nobody has to pay anything. It's mutually beneficial, and you can still outsource what you don't like doing while providing a service and increasing your odds for referrals in the process.
Yeah,
Right.
and we've seen a lot of that in the Lifestar community. It's really cool to watch. But but beyond that, then we're looking at people that sometimes are doing things that don't need to be done, things that aren't moving the business forward, either because maybe they did something at work and now they're doing it on their own and they just had a process. And, thinking through what you might want to eliminate from your workflow is another one. And then obviously automation. If there's a way to automate, we're big fans of HubSpot because it's one of those things where you can, if somebody fills out a form on your site, you could have a whole series of emails get sent. And there's just lots of great things that you can do using that kind of automation. There's tons of other automations depending on what you're doing, but that's a place that you have to invest some time to figure out what to automate, how to automate it. So they don't do that. And lastly, from my perspective, a lot of people, including me, I was probably the worst in the world at this, was having a work process, right? Having a way of working that doesn't waste time. And I discovered something way back called Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's a book. And he just has a process. The whole book just describes a process for dealing with all the stuff that's coming into your inboxes and how to think about those things and how to keep track of them and not have anything fall through the cracks. And I went from being the guy that woke up at 3:00 in the morning going, oh my God, I forgot to do this, or oh my God, I forgot to do that, to, I know what I have to do. I have it. It's there. I can work through it. Not saying I don't mess up sometimes, but it's a huge difference. And that's one of the things that I'd like to push people to review, is finding some kind of working process that is very systematic.
So in the outsourcing, automating, and then having a system for your work.
And lastly, around that system, standard operating procedures, not reinventing the wheel every time you go to do whatever, write it down. We have a whole bunch of standard operating procedures that we've built out, just basically in Google Sheets that everybody can see. And if somebody finds something wrong with it, they can go in and fix it. But having those standard operating procedures makes a big difference in terms of how much time it takes to get something done.
Well, and if you do decide to outsource, you have those SOPs right there and waiting for the contractors.
Yep.
So you don't have to spend hours training. You can even record videos and include them in the why can't I think of the word? The processes. And so they can watch the videos. So if they learn better through a video standpoint, you can do a Loom video and show this is how I do this, this is how I do this, so that you're not just constantly training and retraining. And so, yeah, that is key. It takes some time on the front end, but obviously on the back end, it saves countless hours.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for the time it takes to get automations in place, for the time it takes to write an SOP, that might just be, I call them big rocks. And every quarter I'll look at my big rocks, but that just might need to be, if this is something that's constantly dragging you down and you need to get it off your back, you need to build out the time. And so whatever that works in your system, if it's time blocking, if it's like blocking a day and just getting it done, like you just have to help hold yourself accountable, because what we lose when we leave a corporate environment is you have to create your own working structures. And I think for me, building in external accountability, like we're going live on at 9 a.m. on April 4th, like that's a hard deadline, right? So you have to get things done before that deadline. Like that's something that really works for me, is setting external accountability dates for myself.
I use something called the Eisenhower matrix, which is, important, not important, urgent, not urgent, like a quadrant. And that's really cool, because there's this, we work mostly in the important and urgent, I hope, right? But that place, I think your big rocks are in the important but not urgent.
Right.
And that's where you have those things like, hey, I'm going to automate something that's taking me 3 hours a week, and then it's going to take me 5 minutes a week. Awesome. So investing that time working on the business instead of in the business.
I also think something that's unique to solopreneurs from a time saving standpoint is you don't have to be in the office at 8:30 and stay until 5. You get to work the hours that you work best. So if you tell me to do anything productive after 5:30 p.m., forget it. It's not going to be a good product. 5 a.m., yes, I'm like that Bruce Almighty meme where he's typing away at the computer, or GIF, whatever it's called. I'm so productive. So I try to focus my work hours on my actual productive time that's just innate to me. And then don't work on the hours that I know I'm just going to be producing poor quality work. And that's not something that employees can always say, but solopreneurs can absolutely say that. So use that in your favor when you're trying to save time on things. There's no point in working the hours that you're not productive.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think to the comment of outsourcing too, and like getting external support, I know when you're ramping up, like money is a resource, of course, right? And so I love the idea of bartering. I've definitely bartered, still barter sometimes. One thing that has helped me too, and I think this would be good advice for this group, is if you have an opportunity, but maybe the dollars aren't there, one of the things that you can trade is like a testimonial, a LinkedIn reference, like marketing assets, like other forms of currency. And I only learned this from conversations like this. And so I really appreciate, your guys' candor, sharing what's working, being very vulnerable in this. As we start to wrap up, I want to ask you both, if there's like one big takeaway you want a listener to leave with today, what would that be? And Joe, I'll start with you.
Well, I won't steal your thunder, Carly, because I know what you're going to say.
Like, don't do it.
Yeah. I guess since I can't use Carly's, which I would have used, I would just say when you start your business, or if you're not happy with your business, your solopreneur business, one of the things to think about is that you're not doing this to become a unicorn, right? You're not giving up employees, the most powerful scaling tool that exists, in order to become a multi-billionaire. So you're doing it for some other reason. And that reason probably has something to do with the life you want, right? It might have to do with getting to your kids' games, or being able to go golfing when the weather's nice, or whatever it is, or whatever they are. Put those on paper, and then look at your business and see if your business is designed to meet those goals. And I think people miss that a lot. That I call it step zero. We've created something called the Solopreneur Success Cycle, and there's 8 steps to it, but we call step 0 define your goals, because people skip it. And it's one of those things where if you don't do that, it's very difficult to end up with a business that actually serves those goals. You just have to be really lucky, and it's unlikely. So I'll do that one. And then
it's a great one, because I think your comment, Joe, on like goals, I think when people think goals, it's a lot of business goals. I mean, I know I default there, but You're talking about lifestyle goals and how does your business support your lifestyle goals? And that's great takeaway. I don't think I've ever spent the time to put pen to paper on that.
Mhm.
And then Carly, how about you? What's your big
Dun, da, da, da. Flying solo in business doesn't mean you're alone. That is the biggest takeaway, whether it is just having people to bounce ideas off of or people to hang out with for happy hour, because you don't get that like you do in the workspace anymore. Just plan in the community time, plan in the accountability groups. It can get lonely unless you really focus on it. And yeah, plan on ways to work with others, do the bartering, and build that community. It's awesome.
I think right when I had started, it was a weird transition time to start something like this, but somebody made a comment to me saying, I'm not running this business by myself. And that was something that was like, she's like, I have my family, I have my friends, like I'm not running anything alone. And that was a big shift for me too. So I appreciate that takeaway too, Carly. And if people want to learn more or check out the Lifestar Professional Suite or the Lifestar, the free package that you offer, how can people find Lifestar and how can they join?
Go for it, Joe.
Okay. Well, just go to lifestar.com/intro. And we have basically a free community and tools and content for solopreneurs. Lifestar, Star has 2 R's because we didn't want to be confused with the Medevac helicopter company. But lifestar.com/intro. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Joe Rano on LinkedIn. My email is joe@lifestar.com if you want to reach out that way.
And I will second that. LinkedIn is just Carly Ries, Ries, and it's Carly@lifestar.com.
And when does Solopreneur Business for Dummies come out?
Late September 25.
This year? Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So we'll keep an eye out for that. We'll link everything in the show notes. I want to thank all the viewers who were able to attend live. If you missed it, you can catch the replay wherever you stream podcasts and, of course, on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thanks so much for being here, you guys.
Thank you. This is great.
Thanks. Take care.
All righty.